Welcome to Conversations with Educators. I'm your host, Jerome Ellison, and today I have a special guest, Renaldo Francis. Thank you, Renaldo, for coming on the show.
Absolutely, man. Thank you for having me. Fun fact, this is like my first podcast interview like ever in my life. So
Nice.
this is monumental. So thank you.
Yes, thank you. I appreciate you. So I'd like to get started with a quick game. This game is called Start, Bench, and Cut. So it's
Okay.
pretty much like a team, right? You start the best thing, you bench like the second best thing, and you cut the third best thing. So I'm going to give you three different options.
Okay.
So I want you to think back on your experience in school. So which one would you start, bench, or cut? Your elementary school experience, your middle school experience, or your high school experience, and why?
Ooh. Oh man, that's good. I would definitely start my elementary experience barely.
Mm,
Only just because that was like the most consistent education part of my life. I would bench my I would probably bench my high school
mm,
experience just because I mean it's a good experience, right? Because that's your crossover from teenager to quote unquote adulthood, right?
yeah, pretty much.
But it still wasn't like great for me. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, maybe not. And I would definitely like cut my middle school experience to have the it wasn't like necessarily too bad, but like I did a lot of moving, right? When I was
Okay.
during that time. So that was during the moving from Austin to the Rowlett, Dallas Fort Worth area, and then moving from that area to San Antonio. It was in the middle of all that. So
Okay.
I'm super all set on that whole movement of my
Yeah.
life.
Yeah, that's a lot. Middle school is a
Yeah.
tough time, especially if you're moving and traveling and meeting new people and
It's
new school
gross.
every time. It's
It's
difficult for
so
sure.
gross. Absolutely.
For sure. All right. So we're going to get into some reflective questions. So my next question is, why did you become an educator? What got you to the field of education?
Man, so I originally, I think this is like the majority, maybe 70% of educators, right? They usually don't start out being an educator.
Mm-hmm.
I originally wanted to be a coach and
Mm-hmm.
go into like kinesiology. So back when Obama was in office, he
Mm-hmm.
had like this grant to where if you worked in like an education setting for like 2 years, you get a part of like your school paid for. So I
Yeah.
was like, bet.
Yeah.
So I went into the after school program in San Antonio right after I graduated,
Mm-hmm.
and there was this one student. I had a group of fourth graders that I had, and there's a student who, mind you, I don't have any like I have a little bit of kid experience from like
Mm-hmm.
working in the church and stuff, but like that's
Yep.
it.
Yep.
And this kid, his name was Jake, but he was like an Indian of
Mm-hmm.
India descent,
Yep.
and he spit on my shoe.
Mm.
And like my inner me was like, oh
Yeah.
no, like I'm about to
Yeah.
keep this business, but I knew I
Mm-hmm.
couldn't because I got to keep this job. And my fourth graders was like 15 boys and 3 girls. So I was like, okay, I need to figure out how to get through to these group of kids. And then once I did, by the end of the school year, they were like, oh my gosh, Mr. Francis, are you going to be here next year? Are you going to be our
Mm.
fifth grade teacher?
Mm.
And I was like, I don't know, but it made me feel good because
Yeah.
never, I've never had students or kids need or want me that much, and I didn't know the impact I had until that moment. So then from there I just kind of started building my craft,
Mm-hmm.
and then boom, like I'm here.
I love
So
it.
it's kind of like the main moment right there.
I love that. You said 15 boys and 3 girls in the class? Wow,
Exactly.
that's a lot of boy energy. A lot of boy
Right,
energy.
which is weird, right?
Mm-hmm.
It was super weird, but it was very refreshing because it was at that point it was a good mix of kids, right? There's
Okay.
a good mix of white, black,
Mm-hmm.
Indian. So I got a chance to really be involved with different cultures and
Mm.
different like personalities.
Yeah.
Like I had the sporty ones, then I had my
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to call them nerdy, but they
Mm-hmm.
were book smart. And then I
Mm.
had the ones that were weird,
Yeah.
like and they
Yeah.
and then I had my I call them my random kids where they'll be like, hey, Mr. Francis, did you know
Mm-hmm.
that we can make different color lights? And I was like, I did, but I don't know what sparked that in your mind. And then
Yeah.
just be random. So I had to know how to appeal to all these different types of students, and that was the fun part for me.
I love
So
that. I love
yeah,
that. That's so real. That's so real. I started out in teaching elementary school, right?
right,
First grade. And my class was heavily like the ratio between boys and girls was skewed. There was so many more boys than girls. And I think
right,
that especially as a man, as a man of color in the classroom, it's rare. It's not as often as you see a man. So kids
for
gravitate
real.
toward that, especially if you have a heavily boy influenced group. They're like, man, they want to get to know you. They want to know more about you. They're interested and intrigued in that. And you
Yeah.
can catch them just off of that. You can have them,
And
engaged.
I agree to your point. And I had this conversation with one of my other educator friends that sparked it. It's almost like being a man or a male educator is especially in this world that we're in now, it's like
Mm-hmm.
a sense of privilege.
Yeah.
And then even being an African American male,
Mm-hmm.
that's a whole nother set of privilege that you have that not all educators
Yeah.
do have.
Yeah.
Right. And then of course we could dive in deeper to talk about how school systems abuse the privilege of African American
Mm.
males in their classroom, or how they're stereotyped to only do certain things, right?
Yes.
But at the end of the day, it's a type of privilege
Yes.
that it's not a negative one, right,
Mm-mm.
by any means,
No.
but it's something that I wish that like more school districts across the world
Mm.
would just have.
I agree. And I think as a male, especially as a Black man teacher, you have to make sure you stay connected to your purpose and why you got into the field. Because as you
Yep,
said, there's so much pressure and there's so much responsibility. You can get pushed off of that purpose easily at sometimes in some situations. So if you stay connected to that, it'll keep you in the field and keep you going
agreed,
for a lot longer.
agreed,
You know,
absolutely, man.
definitely. My next question is, so as an educator, as we know, it's extremely difficult, especially during these times. Um, what has been the biggest challenge for you as a teacher?
Oh, man, I would say my biggest challenge has actually been um, these past 2 years, 2, 3 years for me,
Mm-hmm.
um, because transparency wise, I started out teaching middle school.
Okay.
I first, like, after I finished my whole thing with that school program,
Mm-hmm.
and I finished school, I went into it and I started out in middle school, and I started doing sixth grade math. And
Mm-hmm.
then life happened to where I didn't stay at that school, and then I went to go teach seventh and eighth science. Then life happened again. Then I went to go teach fifth science.
Mm-hmm.
Then life happened again, and now I'm teaching third math. So like I have not been consistently in one spot,
Mm-hmm.
right? And for me, it's a good challenge, right? It's me adapting and trying to figure out all these different avenues, from culture to curriculum,
Yeah.
and having that urgency and um the urgency and the I wouldn't say stress, but because I
Mm-hmm.
like it, but
Mm-hmm.
that feeling of like, oh, I got to get these kids to pass the
Yeah.
star.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
It's like, whoa. And then mind you, I'm learning new content every single year.
Yeah.
So the inconsistency has been a good challenge, right,
Mm-hmm.
for me. Another one would just be like just like the racial aspect
Mm-hmm.
of it all. When I was in San Antonio, the school that I was teaching at was majority Hispanic Mexican American.
Okay.
So in my mind, I'm now a minority
Mm-hmm.
teaching a minority that I don't know anything about. They
Mm-hmm.
think they know about African Americans and all this other stuff.
Mm-hmm.
They really don't.
No.
So trying to culturally understand and make sure they understand me and still be a professional was a challenge. And then of course with everything happening in our world these past few months,
Mm.
and then working like in my setting now with third graders, to where they're soaking up and listening to what their
Everything.
parents say and how they feel, and then they come to school. Well, my mama said this,
Mm.
and did you see this? And
Yeah.
knowing how to shut it down, because in my mind, like, nah, you too young for this. It's grown folks stuff.
Mm.
But on the flip, I'm like, I'm glad they have a voice, and I'm glad they're trying to tamper into it, and I want them to kind of grapple with it like appropriately, right?
Yeah.
So I don't want them to not know,
Yeah.
but then I have to be careful with saying my biases and my, you know. So that has been a very interesting challenge as well. Just to make sure like everything is fair, but
Yeah.
I'm still listening,
Mm.
coping, and being empathetic
Yes.
to everyone, even if they don't agree. Because there's
Mm.
been a moment where I have kids in that I teach that are not aligned with what
Mm.
I feel and I believe. Um, so it's a challenge. I remember I had one kid in when I was doing the 7th, 8th science. He was a 7th grader, and he like said a racial slur,
Mm-hmm.
like a really deep one. I wasn't there,
Mm-hmm.
but he was in my homeroom. So we did the whole restorative conversation. We
Yeah.
talked about it. And then he said the slur again.
Wow.
And it was hard. Like I had to really like dig down as a teacher because it was hard because I'm like, yo, this kid is in my homeroom. So I have to do my job. But
Mm-hmm.
clearly he feels this way
Yeah.
about
Strongly.
people who look like me.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
So it was a little bit of a challenge. I told my principal, I was like, this is like mentally a challenge for me.
Mm.
So I don't know what I need to necessarily do at this point. So it was hard.
Yeah.
But I mean, I wouldn't be in this work if it was easy.
I feel you. That's it.
So
That's it.
it's a good challenge to have, but it was definitely hard for sure.
Mm. Yeah, that's so real. That's so real. I mean, and you want to create that setting, that environment where every kid feels safe and comfortable to just speak their minds. Because especially as a kid, we know that they gain this belief somewhere, most likely at home, right? So we know it's not their natural nature. I taught first grade, so the lower you get with teaching kids, you know that they're not born racist.
Correct.
They don't really, they pick it up as they go. Like whether consciously or subconsciously, they pick it up from home or from school or how they see people being treated or the
Right.
media. So
Facts.
you have to just hold that and know that this kid, you want to believe that you can do something to change it, regardless of where they're at that point. You think you can create an environment and create a conversation and create a setting in the schools that can actually change that child. So I think that was big of you to really put your ego aside and really just see the bigger purpose and the mission.
Brother, when I tell you it was hard, it was definitely hard because because the crazy thing was that that student was super bright.
Mm.
He is one of my artsy students. He loved to draw. So I was constantly trying to incorporate stuff. Luckily it was science, right? So it was super easy to incorporate
Mm-hmm.
drawing and art with the content. So he excelled in my class and I felt like we related. But then once that got out, it was
Mm-hmm.
like, oh, now I got to be consistent in how I treat you, knowing this. Because if you're an adult, I knew this, like me personally, I'm good on you. Like I'm wiping my hands to the situation, and I'll be respectful, but I'm not going to be around you. But
Yeah.
I was forced to be around him, so I think it's a good thing that I think I was tested that way because I know it's probably getting me ready for. I mean, I don't want it to happen to me in the future, but
Mm-hmm.
in case it does,
Be
whether it's with
prepared.
another adult or another
Mm.
student, like I'm now prepared for it, you know?
Yeah, for sure. And I think long term, the way you handle that so respectfully and so honorably, when that kid becomes an adult, he's gonna always have you as a reference point, as a person that who wasn't able to rile up, that accepted him for whatever he did and whatever he believed. And that can, it may not connect now, but it may connect in the future. That
I hope
may
so.
change him. You never
And
know.
brother, I pray that it does. But you're right. It's something that, and I think that's another reason why education is so important because whatever you do in that specific moment, whether it's positive, negative,
Mm,
it's going to affect them moving forward.
yeah.
And that's also why I switched back to elementary, right?
Mm,
Because I think middle school and elementary are probably the most important,
yeah.
but after doing some research and like really looking, like me as an African American male
Mm-hmm.
is I'm more needed in the elementary setting
For
than
sure.
middle.
For sure.
So here's a statistic. So our, a public charter school, and in whole district, which is in the Dallas or the Fort Worth area, San Antonio,
Mm-hmm.
Austin, El
Mm-hmm.
this little bit in different states, there is probably four
Mm.
4 people in leadership that are like
Wow.
APIs or assistant principals. There's probably males that are African
Wow.
American males that I know of.
Wow.
And then principals, like in San Antonio, there's only one African American principal. Everyone else is either female, um, or they're either female or they are Hispanic male.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and in other regions, like I only know of 2 more African American principals. One's in Houston, another one's in Baton Rouge.
Mm.
So that's super unequal. Like that's not correct. So
Nope.
all those male principals I just named are in the college prep or 6th grade through 12
Yeah.
standpoint, right? So we need more. We need more of that. So I made that move because I know like how necessary it is. Or it sticks with them. And now they can say I had a Black male teacher or someone that was in my building that was a male and Black, that they could say like, yep, Mr. Francis, he was on my tail, but like I got my stuff done and I passed, and he made me ready for middle school. He made me ready for high school. Like that's the ultimate goal that I hope all educators like have, you know?
Definitely. I love that. Love that. So what has been your proudest moment? What is something that you've experienced that every time you think about it, puts a smile on your face as a teacher?
So when life was happening, I went to I was put back into the charter school I'm in now. I did public schools, and I went to a campus that was way below average on every metric. They were last. Turnover rate was ridiculous. Like if you let the kids tell it, they said they would tell you we've had 14 teachers since the first day, right? And I got there in November. So so I got back on at Idea Nasium to teach 7th grade, which is the godforsaken grade. I 7th grade is for a special individual. I don't wish it on anybody. They're special creatures. So we were like last in everything. And this was right before the pandemic started. So the principal, Gerald Boyd, was there, and he was able to hire me back on there. And he had a whole bunch of other bomb teachers, great teachers. And we had this goal to turn our campus in, from our district rating was an F. We had to at least turn it around to a B before the end of the school year. Mind you, the culture was trash. Kids were being super disrespectful to everyone, which is naturally so because no one stayed. They have trust. I get it. On every star scale metric, they were low. So we had to change it. So I was teaching 7th math at the time there. And most importantly, this school had the highest percentage of African American students out of all of San Antonio, besides probably like one other campus. So it was great for me because I was now officially teaching kids, and when the majority of my class looked like me. So I was like, yo, this is great.
This is your chance, yeah.
And so me and the rest of the team that was there, we busted our tail to get them to where they needed to be. And then the last mock star that we took right before spring break, if everything would have worked out, my 7th graders went from being 30, I think it was like 37% proficient or approaches with only 2% mastery. We went to that to 82% proficient and then 29% mastery, which was huge between when I got there in November and March.
Yeah.
And it was great. And what I loved about it was the kids saw their growth and they were like, oh, we're not dumb.
That's it. That's the biggest point right there.
Because they knew everyone talked about Nasium. They knew they saw people coming in and out. They saw the higher ups coming in. They saw teachers in and out going. And so it was a big deal for them to be like, yo, we did this. And I was like, yes, y'all did it. I literally just put more pictures up and probably did extra teaching to make sure it stuck. But like, y'all did it. And it was great. And I think one of my favorite moments from that was when I was being observed. And my principal, Gerald Boyd, to say the least, he's an amazing principal. he's very intense. And so, and the kids know if he comes into your classroom,
It's
it's
real.
like, oh
Serious.
my God.
Yeah.
So when he came in, and of course they're doing real-time coaching, all that kind of good stuff. And my kids got nervous at that time. And that homeroom at the time was like my live homeroom. Most of my boys were in there. They don't like to sit still. We had to do a lot of movement, kinesthetic stuff, right? So, but they weren't doing that at that time. And after my observation, they came, they gave me the feedback, they left. And one of my students was like, Mr. Francis, like, are you okay? And I said, I'm great. Like, this happens every day. Like, I'm not on this. And they were like, well, no, because we were scared because we thought, and this was the realest moment to me, because every time they saw people come in, usually the teacher didn't stay after.
Wow.
So they got nervous, like, yo, are they going to try to fire you? Are they going to do this? And I said, I didn't know what to say, because I didn't want to say no. If you see people come in and they're giving me feedback, it's good, right? But in that sense, I could see where they were coming from. So I literally stopped class. I didn't get in trouble for it, but they definitely talked to me about it, because they're all about content first. But I felt like I stopped class. I had a restorative circle with them, and I said, look, what I need y'all to understand is, one, before the pandemic happened, I'm not going anywhere. Two, this is important to know in your life, that regardless of who's going in and out, you still have to do your job.
Life
and you
lesson.
can't let other people dictate your job, right? And they were just like, yeah, but we want you to stay. And I was like, I hear you and I appreciate that. But like, let's be real. Mr. Francis ain't gonna be here forever. You ain't gonna be here forever. What if I was selfish? I need you to stay in 7th grade. And they're like, they rough. Like, yeah, nah, Mr. Francis, I ain't gonna stay. Right. You're not. So that moment that was my driving force that year, because I was like, man, if we can turn Najm around, and they're still on the up and up right now, then I know I did my job.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And those group of kids, they're probably not on that now, but they were on some, oh, we're now stuck in the house because of, COVID-19. Mr. Francis, what if we just like sneak into the school and we go learn? I was like, you're onto something. But safely, we didn't have the measures and stuff to do that. So we couldn't do it right at that time. But they wanted to do that before, but I'm sure now they're like, ugh, no, we can stay home. We're good. But that moment was forever like, yep, that was I felt really proud. Because I also had to learn 7th grade math myself, right? So the fact that they were feeling that way after me learning and then me teaching them, it was phenomenal. It was beautiful.
That's amazing. That's amazing. I mean, there's so many things to touch I can talk about based on that. I mean, you knew their history. I think that's important when you're in a setting, especially in a new school. Knowing the history of the students and what they've been through makes you more empathetic. It makes you understand where they are, right? They cared about you, right? They cared about you enough to be worried about whether you were getting in trouble or you're going to leave them or not. And honestly, when you have that relationship with kids, they'll do almost anything for you. When they know you're caring, committed to them, and they start to care and trust you, they'll do anything. When any administrator, any observer walks in, they'll be on their A game because they care about you and they know what's going on and they want to put their best foot forward because they care about the person that's in front of them. So I think that's a great story, great inspiring story.
And sure. I miss them, but then I like dealing with them in their puberty stage. There'll be times like, y'all get out my face. Rough. I cannot deal with y'all right now. So
those middle school years are rough.
Man, that's an understatement. That's a huge understatement. But I miss it. I do miss them because I know what I'm learning this year is I can't be a middle school teacher and teach 3rd grade. There's a whole nother level of empathy and sensitivity that you have to like have. That in the beginning I had to learn, because there's some, like in the beginning, there was one 3rd grader, she just started crying. And I said, no, ma'am, you will not be crying up in this room. You better wipe those tears. And then I had to reflect. I was like, okay, I don't know why she was crying. I probably didn't need to go so hard in the paint with her. So I circled back and I said, so are you feeling better? Why were you crying? Oh, well, it's the 2nd day of school and I miss my mommy. That's real. I miss my mom too.
Mm-hmm.
But in this moment, what we need to focus on was how to add these 2-digit numbers. And we can talk about your mom afterwards. And she was like, oh, okay. So, I have to really be intentional about circling back. But then there's times now they understand. There are now times I'm throwing the hammer down. They're like, yo, Mr. Francis ain't playing.
Exactly.
But I had to learn how to balance that out.
Balance it out.
Yes, because it was,
Yeah,
I
for
can't do it
sure.
all the time. I
For
could not.
sure. I love it. Next question. Based on your experience, right? What is one thing that you would either add to the system, educational system, take out the educational system, do more of, or do less of? What do you think? What change or improvement do you think needs to happen?
That's such a loaded question. And what's hilarious is what I think is I personally don't think all educators are going to agree with, but what my stance on this is, it's not about what I think will work best for me, but like what's going to be best for these kids and these school districts, right? So the first thing I would do is, like, I would make sure principals have more time and flexibility to give feedback to teachers and be intentional with their feedback. Because I'm gracious enough to be in a public charter school where feedback drives everything. So that's already implemented in our heart and soul of what we do. I know that there's the majority of public schools, they don't do that.
True.
They might see their principal maybe 2 times,
Yeah.
and may not see a coach or anything. So you mean to tell me if I'm doing something wrong, you're gonna let me do it wrong all year? That, to me, that's wild. So I think across the board, no matter what kind of private, public charter, public school, there needs to be more feedback to teachers, or leader to leader, right?
Yeah.
There needs to be more feedback given, so that way it's positively affecting the kids all the way around. That's number one. Something that I would add and keep going is that I think us being forced to be virtual like this has saved time. It might be a little bit more expensive on the front end, but it saves time in other ways for kids and for teachers, right? So if I can be on a staff meeting at home, like I can leave the building at 1:30, 2 o'clock, depending on what your schedule looks like, and I can get on a staff meeting at home instead of staying at school, or choose, right?
Choosing, yeah.
Or like I can do a hybrid schedule and teach my master level kids virtually because they can handle it and they know what to do, and be more one-on-one with my, like, this technology game has been great. Is it a headache to teach, especially like in elementary? Absolutely. But if we schedule in time to teach and make them, proficient and really good at that stuff in the beginning, right? I think this whole tech thing could be a game
changer. I agree.
really
I agree.
So I really hope, like, funding can still be continued to be poured in for this. Like tech for one-on-one, like that was a great attempt to close the equity and equality gap. Like, great attempt. Let's keep that up, right?
Yeah.
Hopefully that's something we can keep doing. Something I would take away is, I would take away corporations making state assessments. One thing I've learned is that these people in these offices, majority of them are not teachers. And you tell me a teacher is not making an assessment that can determine if a 5th or 8th grader can pass and go to the next section of their life?
Doesn't make sense.
That doesn't make any sense. It would, to me, my greatest solution would be an educator would receive some kind of stipend, or it's a whole nother job, to create these tests, right? And from those tests, that's what we use to determine our state assessments and children passing and whatnot. Because it just baffles me how a corporation can make these tests and they're not educators.
Nope. Wow. That's
You know what I mean?
that's so many gems within those few things. I like collaborative working and feedback, administrator to administrator, teacher to teacher. There's so much knowledge within
Right.
schools that we don't need to look outer. We need to just find a way to build systems that we can support each other and be comfortable, build trust so that we can feel comfortable supporting each other and allowing
Absolutely.
everyone to be a grower and a lifelong learner. The standardized testing thing, I completely agree. Even the remote learning or this technology in the field of education. I think
Right.
one positive that came for me, I would say, is class sizes, right? For so long, we've been trying to get smaller class sizes.
Yep.
Technology in a way has helped a little bit, right? Right now I'm in the building and we
Absolutely.
have about 8 to 11 kids in the classroom, and you can really address all the kids' needs as much as
Yep.
possible, right? So if we can
Exactly.
find a way to make some kind of hybrid schedule, like you said, where kids who are successful remotely can get what they need, and kids who need that in the building attention and support can get that. If we can be flexible with that and we keep that in the system, it can be a game changer because we can really
It
do much
absolutely
better with supporting all of our
would.
kids' needs.
Man, what? And I think, and something to add to the feedback part is making sure that we're giving feedback in a safe space.
Safe space, yeah.
Because like if I go into your campus and you the only one that I even closely know,
Mm-hmm.
right? I'm not gonna come into a teacher's classroom and if their culture is lacking, I'm not just gonna stop, reset the
Mm-hmm.
whole thing because they're gonna be like, yo, who is this dude? I'm
Mm-hmm.
not, because that's not a safe space,
Nope.
right?
Nope.
What it needs to look like, in my opinion, is when that teacher is done teaching whatever, they're doing their labs, whenever they have a pause moment, or at the end of class, hey, these are some things I saw that you need to keep doing, right? Let's talk after school about how we can make these points stronger.
Mm-hmm.
By the way, my name is Renaldo Francis. I'm here visiting. Don't be
Yep.
alarmed. Like, build that trust
Build that
because
trust.
I'm already very much like a father hen when it comes to my kids and
Mm-hmm.
even with my teacher. So if someone new is walking down my hallway, I'm looking like, who is this? Who are you?
Mm-hmm.
Right. And I even make it a point to, if people come into my classroom, they ask me or they give me feedback. I say, wait, excuse me, respectfully, like who are you?
Mm-hmm.
Because I need to know who you are first, so that way I know like where this feedback's coming from. Because I'm sorry, if you are a if you are an educational dietitian, that means you're powerful in SPED. That means you're powerful in speech. But if you giving me feedback on my lesson in a gen ed setting, I'm
Different.
gonna hear you, but I don't know if it's going to be as valid as coming from an actual instructional leader, right?
Mm,
So it's framing the feedback, I think, is good because then it helps bring trust and
yes,
everything.
for sure, for sure. Great, great. So this segment is called Each One Teach One. So if you had a chance to give one piece of advice to a first year teacher based on your experience as a first year when you were a first year teacher, what advice would you give that teacher and why?
Um, I would give them the same advice that I was given from another coach, and my wife, because she's also an educator as well.
Nice, nice.
Um, Making sure that you focus on culture and relationships first before you try to dive into anything else. And I mean, being super detailed to, this is the vibe and how you come into my room for the first 5 minutes. This is how you leave for the
Mm,
last five. This is what raising your hand looks like. This is what, like, all the little
little
things
things.
culturally in your space needs to be on point. And then building relationships with that and getting to know your kids,
Mm,
because like if I know I have a majority of boys in my homeroom or in that specific class,
mm-hmm,
then most of my math problems are going to be geared towards Pokemon cards and
mm,
sports
mm,
and you know boy stuff,
mm,
right? I'm gonna mix it towards that. If it's girls, I'm gonna put bows and barrettes and pins, like
mm-hmm,
colorful stuff in there. I'm gonna let them draw. But I'm also gonna let them know, like, in this space, you will not just get up whenever you want to. You will not just shout out. You need to make sure you do this, because I'm a firm believer that if you get those two together, and I'm a believer because I did it, you can teach any subject.
and it's true.
You can
Get to
teach.
know your kids. Getting to know your
That was
kids.
and
Mm-hmm.
that was me because I'm more of a math head. But then when life happened and I had to go teach science, I didn't know nothing about no science. I didn't know how to
Mm-hmm.
teach it. I didn't know anything.
Mm-hmm.
But I made sure my culture was tight to where now it made me coachable to learn the different pedagogies and frameworks of that content. And it made it so much easier because even if I was messing up, my class was still on point to where it was like, oh, they let me mess up and now let's go back and fix it to where they're not getting crazy. So literally, I would say focus on culture, like drive it hard. Because it's so much easier to be firm, and I don't want to say mean, but firm and respectable, and then ease up as you go and try to be their friend. And then you throw your culture on. They're like, oh, this dude is too much, switched up on us. You know what I mean? So, making relationships and culture, gotta hit those first.
I love that. I love that. Great advice. Great advice. All right. So this is the last segment. This one is called Choose Your Teachers Wisely. So this is a chance for you to give a shout out to, it can be a person, a teacher, a book, a podcast, a video, anything, one thing that has educated you to become a better person.
Oh man, there's so many.
This one. Pick one is hard. It's really hard.
I'm gonna keep it, well, it's not necessarily safe, but I'm gonna do a shameless husband plug. My wife, who's also a principal within Idea Public Schools.
Nice.
She is phenomenal. And one thing I love about her in the education world is that besides her passion, and the fact that she's an African-American woman teaching or leading kids that look just like her, she was blessed and able to hire such a diverse staff, which is super hard to do, and get quality at the same time, to where like her school is a phenomenal running machine, and it's amazing. And like they all trust her. They all will follow her to the ends of the earth.
That's hard to build as a leader. Extremely hard to build.
This is her first full year as a principal, first year school.
Wow.
So like it's amazing and it's super inspiring. So there's days where I'm coming home and I'm just like, oh man, babe, I have to do X, Y, Z. But then I hear all about this great stuff that she's doing at her school. I'm like, oh man, that makes me feel better. Sometimes I'm like, dang, I wish I could do that too. But it is what it is. And but it's just beautiful to know that I get to be like right next to her as she's doing this. So shout out to Miss Kanika Francis at Idea Edgecliff, killing the game.
I love that. I love that. That's great. I mean, you might, if possible, you can put a little plug in for me. I would love to have her on as well.
Listen, she's right in the next door.
We'll stay in contact.
I definitely will be like, hey, what you doing?
Let me know. Let me know. Send me a message. Let me know. I'd love to have her on as well.
Absolutely.
For sure.
Absolutely.
So, thank you, Renaldo, for coming on. It was so many gems, so much great stuff in here, and I can't wait to listen to it back, watch it back, and really keep learning from it. So thank you. I appreciate you.
I can't wait to hear it. It's my first official one. So this is a celebratory moment. So I wish you the best in this podcast, man. Hope it grows abundantly, man. So I greatly appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you. Love. Thank you guys for watching. Stay blessed. And remember, education over everything. Peace.
Word. Bye.